maybe sometime soon.
But Mommy, I can't wait. It's my favorite place.
Well, how about if we close our eyes and imagine we're there right now? Why, I can just see colorful candies, icing as white as snow. Gingerbread land is where I love to go. It's the land where dreams come true. I can be me and you can be you. It's the only place where you can eat your mistakes. I wish the world, I wish the world, I wish the world could be this way.
Welcome to Gingerbread Land. I'm Patty, the gingerbread lady. Weren't those houses wonderful? Aren't gingerbread houses fun to look at? They make you smile. They give you a lift. And you know what makes them so special? The uniqueness and specialness of the person that makes them, because they put something of themselves into that house. I wanted you to meet my gingerbread family, lovingly crocheted by Grandma Hudson. Mrs. Gingerbread, Mr. Gingerbread, and all their kids. And you can see a lot of different kids have joined this family, and they have two bears, Cinnamon and Ginger. And then, of course, Dorothy joined our family a few years ago. She is a wonderful help. She helps take care of these kids when I'm busy baking gingerbread houses. I don't know how I'd do it without her. Today, I'm going to show you how to make gingerbread houses. And I hope that you can experience and discover with me the joy of gingerbread house making. This is my magic wand. Do you believe in magic? I do. If you don't have a magic wand like this, you can pretend you do. Use your imagination. In making gingerbread houses, you use your imagination to get ideas. If you notice looking at these two sample houses I'm going to show you, these will be the two type houses I will be making today for you to watch. This little house I call Cookie Cottage. It's made of graham crackers, but if you ask a child what it is, they wouldn't say it's a cookie cottage. They'll say it's a miniature, little, tiny gingerbread house. I would like you to also realize that you can make gingerbread houses for all seasons of the year. And if you look at this, you can see lots of ideas. We have a little gingerbread rabbit over in the side yard nibbling at some bushes. And we have jelly beans in the backyard because this is a spring house arranged like a fence in the backyard. And I just really like the little lake made with blue icing and little ducks in the lake. All these things are done with icing and candies and graham crackers and placed according to your own imagination, the person making the house. And then this is a big gingerbread house. I will be showing you step by step how to make this house today. You can see there are lots and lots of ideas and different things you can do. And no two houses are ever alike because one idea leads to another. And you know, I have a saying, gingerbread houses don't have to be perfect. They're fun to make, you try things out, and if something doesn't work exactly the way you want, you just eat it. So in gingerbread house making, you eat your mistakes. I want to call your attention to Patty's Gingerbread Video Cookbook, which you found included with your video. In your book, you will have the recipes, the patterns, and the directions to make the houses that you see here. So now, let's be on with the magic. Now we're getting ready to make our house, and no matter what kind of a house, whether it be a cookie cottage and miniature house of graham crackers or a large gingerbread house, you need something to hold your house together, the mortar. And we're going to use icing. I'm going to be talking first of all about how I'm going to get the icing onto the house. You don't have to be an expert cake decorator to make gingerbread houses. In fact, you can spread icing on the end of a knife or spatula onto the sides of your house pieces and put it together. But today I'm going to show you how to use paper cones, which I will fill with icing and use to put my house together. These paper cones come in triangles, which you can buy at department stores which carry cake decorating supplies, Or you can send in to mail order catalogs like the Made of Scandinavia, and you will find the address in the video cookbook. They come in a small size and a large, and on these you will find directions how to make the cones. You will get a direction such as this with the mail order catalog, and on the back of this. Every good teacher, I believe, says there's not any one way to do anything. Do it your way, just so your end product is what you want, and so it works. I'm going to show you how I make these cones. I put the triangle down in front of me with the point toward me. Take my index finger up to about the center of the longest part of the triangle, pick up the side to the left or the right of you, depending if you're right or left-handed, and turn it, letting my finger be my stopper. And now I have it the shape that I want. I'm going to pick it up, pick up the end that is the loose end, bring it around my cone and pull it toward me as well as around at the same time, so that I end up with a cone overlapping the layers of paper. But most important, that you have all the layers of paper right next to one another. You don't want spaces between them. You can make adjustments by looking in your cone, shift the papers till you get it really, really tight, and then I use a stapler. And I just reach in there, making sure I get all the layers, and staple these, because I make a lot of these, so I can do them ahead of time and have them ready when I want to use them. You can also buy plastic cones. You can buy fabric cones that are already made to use. There are a lot of different things. You can also use freezer paper, but I don't recommend wax paper for making your parchments. Now, after the parchment is made, now we have to talk about the icing. I have this icing in a container which has a lid on because it does get a crust on it very quickly. This is called a royal or decorative icing. You can see when I mix it that it's quite stiff. You need a stiff icing to make these houses. You want them to stick together, and you also can nibble at it too. You might want to taste it as a sample on your graham cracker. You need to beat this icing until it gets a stiff peak, not a soft peak, a stiff peak. I do also want to say that you can use a variety of icings, particularly for the cookie cottages. You can use canned icing or even icing that you use to make your cakes for frosting cupcakes or cakes. But just remember that if you have butter or margarine in those icings, those houses must be either refrigerated or eaten very quickly. That's one nice feature with this royal icing. The recipes that I've given you in the book are made with either fresh egg whites or meringue powder. I have here a container of meringue powder. You can purchase this through the mail order catalogs or at department stores which carry cake decorating supplies. There are advantages and disadvantages to both, and when I teach my classes, I suggest that the students might want to try a recipe using egg whites and a recipe using the meringue powder and decide which you prefer. The main advantage that I have found to the meringue powder recipe is these are dried egg whites. They can be kept for several days in the refrigerator and rebeaten. Your icing with the recipe with the fresh egg whites will have to be refrigerated, but for some reason it will not beat back to stiffness. And so you can use it on cupcakes or cookies, but not to build a gingerbread house. So experiment with them and see which works best for you. Now I want to fill one of these cones for you, and I use either a piece of masking tape or Scotch tape. If I'm not going to put a decorator tip in this, and right down at the seam close to the point of the cone, I put a piece of Scotch tape or masking tape. This is just for security, so when I cut the end open to squeeze out the icing, that it doesn't come apart there at the seam. Then I take icing on the end of a knife or spatula, maybe a generous tablespoon, and I reach down inside my cone, and with my fingers under my cone, I press the knife or spatula against my fingers, and that helps to let the icing be released. And I just repeat this, filling the cone not more than about half full. The reason I say not more than half full is because it makes it difficult to close the top. Now again, some of you may be cake decorators, and there are a variety of ways to close these bags. But the way I have found out of sheer necessity, teaching workshops to a lot of beginners who have never done this before, I have found the best way is to close the top very, very tightly, squeezing all the layers of paper together, and then using a twister tie, like you get with plastic bags, around the parchment cone. Pull it as tightly as you can and twister it. And this will keep the icing from coming out of the top. Now I'm going to take another piece of masking tape and just put it on my seam there if it tends to want to come open a little bit more. And remember, this icing needs to be covered so that it won't get a crust on the top. I'll lay this down because I also want to show you how I fill a cone using a cake decorator tip. I'll move this icing over here. I cut about 3/4 of an inch of my bag from here. And this is called a coupling, or some people call it a coupler. It's made of plastic. It has two parts. The larger part goes down inside your bag, the small part down that has little threads on it. Then I take my cake tip, and this one is a number 16. This is called a star tip. Now you will find in your video cookbook the list of the tips that I suggest and how to use them. And I put the tip over the end of the bag holding the coupler in place, and then the small half of the coupler goes over my metal tip, and I squeeze that through the paper till it makes contact with those threads and is held on very securely. Now this bag is ready to fill. Get my icing back in exactly the same way that I did it before, and always remix your icing a little bit because this icing has had air beaten into it. Remember to make it a very stiff peak, and so you want to have it as smooth as possible. Now we'll repeat the same thing we did with the other bag. I will reach down, fill my cone to about half full, and you can use tips without using a coupler, and you can just cut the end and drop the tip down in. Just be sure you don't have the opening larger than the end of your tip. All right, just let about 1/4 of an inch there. All right, I'm using just the white icing here, and isn't this a beautiful white? Looks like snow, doesn't it? One more shot of icing down in this cone. Now we'll close this, and the reason also for this twister tie, which I don't believe I mentioned, when beginners are first using these bags, I want to show you how I recommend holding it. Now I'm going to put the twister tie on. I keep a damp cloth handy to wipe my sticky fingers. And I recommend holding this bag in between my thumb and my index finger right where the twister tie is, and then wrapping my fingers around it in this manner. And then I'm ready to squeeze the icing out. But you see what happens when beginners get so excited making their gingerbread houses that they squeeze in the middle of the bag instead of from the top, so that icing pressure, the icing is pushed, you see, up to the top of the bag as well as down. But we want to squeeze all from the top. And I have a couple graham crackers here, and you practice, and we'll just squeeze some icing back and forth. And practice on some graham crackers or on wax paper. And now we're ready to go to work to make our house. Now I'm going to show you how to make the good beginning gingerbread house. If you haven't made one before. Hello there!
I came because some friends of mine said you were making something that was really yummy, and it looks like they were right.
Well, I think it's great that you came. Who are you?
I'm yellow, can't you tell?
I can tell that you're yellow. This is Yellow, friends.
Hello?
I have some friends here who are going to watch me make cookie cottages.
Ooh,
Would you like to learn?
I would love to learn.
Okay. I think that's great. I'll tell you what. I have a magic wand here.
Magic. I love magic wands.
I do too. And if I tap you with my magic wand, then you can be in the audience and watch and learn.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Isn't this fun? Now, we're going to make a cookie cottage so that you can see how I do it and you can make one. Better push my sleeves up here because now I'm really going to go to it. And yet this is very fun work. First thing I want to mention is when you cut the grams to make your little houses, use a serrated edge knife. This is a knife with a little saw edge. You will have much less breakage with your grams if you do that. Now these happen to be cinnamon grams. You can use plain graham crackers too. I like the look of the sugar cinnamon because it is a little darker color. I'm going to use a sawing motion and cut 2 whole grams in half. I will have 4 halves. Those will be the sides of my house. Then I'm going to cut 1 large gram into a 3/4 piece. In other words, I will cut 1/4 of this gram from one end. This will be one of my roofs, and I need 2 roofs. So I will cut another 1/4 from the second whole gram. Now we need a triangular shape to hold our roof up. So I'm going to take the 1/4 that I cut from here and make it into a triangle by cutting 2 small triangles from the center of this small piece of gram to the corner. I will hold this up for you in a minute. And there you can see we have our triangle that's going to hold our roof up. Of course, I need 2 of these triangles, so I'll repeat this procedure again. Now we have there the parts of our house. I have here a set of grams all cut for a little house, which a friend of mine called a prefabricated house package, and I put them in little baggies, have them all ready to use at a party or a workshop. That saves you time cutting them at the workshop or party, and they're ready to go. And that's, of course, what I have done here when I cut these for you. And now I want to call your attention to some candies, which we'll be using to decorate the house. And you can use any number of things. I'm going to be using a chocolate mint for the door of my little house. You can see I have a variety of things, and as I use them, I'll mention them to you. But I do want to tell you that you can use cereals, pretzels, raisins, nuts, things that you have in your kitchen all the time, and decorate a little natural house that is really very nice, and may be nice for children to not have quite as much candy, because we do use the icing too. Now I'm going to move this Lazy Susan over so that I can build this house right for you to watch. Now I have the icing already in a bag, which I showed you earlier, and I need to show you some bases. You have a lot of options, but you do need something that is very firm. Here's a piece of white styrofoam which can be used for a base. Here's a piece of cardboard covered with contact adhesive. Usually I use cardboard covered with aluminum foil, and that's what I'm going to be using here. I'm going to use a small base, but of course you can make them as large as you want. Children usually like them at least 8 by 8 or 10 by 10 because they have more surface to decorate, more creative things to do in their yards. Let's see. I'm going to squeeze icing along the edge, and here's a good thing for me to show you. If the bag gets a little bit dry, just take a toothpick, put it in the end of the bag, and you immediately have your icing ready to go again. I'm going to squeeze icing along 2 sides of this gram. Don't forget, if you've never done this before, you need to practice. And remember also, you need to hold this bag from the top so that all the pressure is going out the bottom onto your graham or cookie or gingerbread house. Now I'm going to turn this around so you can see I'm going to put extra icing along this bottom edge. Now I believe gingerbread houses should be made with a friend. It makes it a lot of fun. But if you're doing it by yourself like I am, just take a little dish of candies or a little jar or a Jell-O box or something like that to hold that up while you prepare the second gram. Now I'm going to squeeze icing along 2 edges of the second gram, which will be the second side of my house. And I will turn this around so that you can see. I will move my little candy dish over and put the second gram right corner to corner. And notice that I put icinged edges to icinged edges. Your house will be a lot stronger that way. Here again is a place for me to point out to you how important it is for the icing to be stiff. I'm going to take a little extra icing and squeeze up inside in the corner, inside of the house. Every gingerbread house will stand up and last longer and not collapse when bumped if it has a lot of icing holding it together. I'm going to take a candy stick to put at the corner, but if that should get a little bit dry, just squeeze a little extra soft new icing up in that corner, put down my icing bag here, and put my little candy stick there. Here's where the fun comes in. I can put a little dab of white icing there, and using a little Dynamint or a Tic Tac, put it at the corner to make it colorful. Now I'll just repeat this procedure. I will be squeezing icing along two edges again of this new piece of the house, or the side of the house. And notice again, I'm putting icing on this cut edge so that I put an icinged edge to an icinged edge. And these corners come together almost as though they were mitered, not overlapping one another. Now I'll turn this around and again reach my bag of icing down and squeeze extra icing up inside the corner. Turn my house around so you can see. And while this is sticky, put my candy stick there. The candy stick is to look pretty, but it also makes my house stronger. The structural house is stronger. I'll put my green candy there. And now I'm ready to put the last side of my house in place. So this time I will squeeze icing along the two side edges that remain that are constructed, and then I will squeeze icing along the two sides of the gram and along the bottom. I will put this in place. Again, mitering those corners, bringing those icinged edges to icing edges. Going to reach inside with my bag, put extra icing up in those corners so that one little bump won't make this house fall down. Now I'm going to place my candy sticks on these corners. These little candy sticks also make nice lampposts. You may remember seeing one on the house I showed earlier today. Now I'll place the two little green candies at the top of the candy sticks. And this is where the child in this gingerbread lady, and probably every adult, can't resist putting a surprise inside before the roof goes on. So I'm going to suggest one possibility for a surprise would be a little package of candy, like this is called a money candy. It's colorful, little wafers. You can drop that inside. This has to go in, of course, before the roof goes on this house. Another possibility, you could put another mint inside, or let's see, how about a few M&Ms? Let's put a couple M&Ms in there. I had one mother tell me that her little boy was so surprised to find inside a family of gummy bears, which we put around a little wafer table in his cookie cottage. After I have my surprise inside, then I'm ready to put the triangles on, which are going to hold up my roof. Now, I used to put a straight line of icing, but I think it's really important to have a wide ledge of icing to hold this triangle up. So I'm zigzagging my icing back and forth across the front of my house and the back where I've decided I want to put these triangles to hold my roof up. Now here is another place where it is important for that icing to be stiff. And also a helper could come in handy, but we're going to hope this works since I'm doing it for you by myself. Now I'll put the other triangle on. Now we're ready to put the roof on our house, our surprise inside. I will use the same zigzag motion of the icing because it gives a wider ledge, and we want this roof to be really fastened securely in place. I'll put icing along 2 times on this ledge, and now on this triangle back and forth. Now I'm ready to put the roof in place, and I will repeat the same procedure, squeezing icing in the back and forth motion. I have children say sometimes, "Gingerbread lady, my icing won't zigzag like yours did." And I say then, practice on a graham cracker or a piece of wax paper, and before you know it, they've got it zigzagging just like mine. It just takes practice. Remember to put icing across this part of the side of your house because we want every part to be fastened securely with icing. Now, I'll put on the second roof piece, put that right in place, press it into the icing, and there's just a little space here in the center, so I'll go across my roof with a little extra icing. I don't want to see any open spaces, so I check my house underneath. If I see an open space, I squeeze a little extra icing. Remember this chocolate mint, I'm going to squeeze a little bit of icing on the back of it and cement it in place with my icing, and we have an instant door. Then I can draw. I have a bag here of icing with a little plain tip, number 3 tip on, and I can draw a little window next to our door. You can make little window boxes with flowers there. We can put a doorknob on our door. We can put a zigzag of icing above the door and put a tiny little yellow chiclet to look like a little lamp or light above the door. Now I wanted to mention the cereals because sometimes children who are just learning to do this can't draw windows too well. So the little Check cereals, this happens to be a Quaker Life cereal. Any of the Check cereals work well. They're instant windows. So I'll put a little dab of icing on the side of my house and put this little cereal, and we have an instant window. Now I'm going to set this house aside, save time, and show you a house which I have done ahead of time, and you can see some of the details. I have this house with the Check cereal for a window. For fun, I put a little picture window in the back of our house to show you how you can draw it with icing and put little curtains. I have pink curtains in the window, and I put little shutters, green icing shutters, on the side of the window. And the other thing that I didn't mention was I put a little sugar heart. I think hearts and gingerbread houses go together. Put a little sugar heart underneath there. So what I do is build my house, decorate the sides, and then decorate the roof. I'm going to show you one way that you can decorate your roof. I'll be using M&Ms. I'm going to just put some dabs of icing, squeezing them out in little dots with my parchment cone, and then I'll put some candies in place on those. And I used to make my scallops first, or my shingles. And by the way, put that M&M there. If the M&M isn't perfect, this is a great time to have a reject. And it is fun to eat one now and then. M&Ms are one of my favorites. So I'll put another new dab of icing, wiping my fingers off to get the icing there. And, okay, going to make another row, this time with 3. And if you want to be a perfectionist, because my motto is gingerbread houses don't have to be perfect, you can use an X-Acto knife and actually cut your M&Ms in half and have exact shingles all the way across. And I'll put these M&Ms on. Remember how I said about you can eat your mistakes? If I smear up an M&M and get too much icing on it, then I'll eat that one. There. Now that I have the candies in place for my shingles, I'll use some white icing with a star tip, the number 16, and make a little scallop shingle-like decoration around each of these M&Ms, repeating it as I go up the roof. And then here I just slip a little extra bit of icing in where I don't have a complete shingle. Okay, and then it would be interesting, you could either use little candies at each of those sections where the shingles come together, or here I have a star 16 with the green icing in it, and I'm going to squeeze just a little bit of that in place, but I have to use my toothpick again to help out my little bit of dry icing. There we go. And this adds just a little bit of color and interest to your roof. And then I would repeat this on the other side of the roof, but again to save time. Now I'll put this house aside and show you a house which I have completed both sides of the roof. And as well, this time, I've added some icing on the top and put some colorful jelly beans and several of the green Tic Tacs along the top of the roof. Now this would be a good time for me to tell you about these pre-decorated pieces. You saw the house going together and decorated in place. Now you see that you can take the pieces of the house, decorate them, put on the doors and windows, decorate the roof. These can be dried at least several hours and then stored in a tin with wax paper or foil between, and you can get as many as 8 houses in one tin. And then it shortens the time to put it together when you're ready to use your houses, either as decorations or as gifts. The next thing I'm going to do is decorate my yard. I have some icing here, which is just like I showed you earlier, to put in the yard. And you do your yard just as if you were decorating a cake. In other words, not decorating a cake, rather, but frosting your cake. So I'll just spread this icing in the yard, and notice how nice this white royal or decorative icing looks in your yard if you're doing a snow scene. It truly does look like snow. Now you'll notice I'm having a little trouble getting my icing up right next to the house, so I'll show you how I solve that problem in just a moment. There are so many fun things you can do in your yard, and I have made some things ahead of time as samples to show you. For instance, we can use a stepping stone candy, like a little wafer, Necco wafer there for a stepping stone, and we can use some green M&Ms like bushes beside the door. And I want to talk to you about some snowmen. My snowmen have been very, very successful. I'm going to put a snowman here in my yard, and I make these out of this same icing. And you can see the stages there. You can see that makes a nice addition to our little house. I have pre-decorated some little gumdrops. You know, some aren't the color that you want for the season. So I put some little stars of colored green icing on those gumdrops, and these can be little bushes in my yard. I'll turn my yard around, and I have made some little tiny gingerbread rabbits, which we can put in the yard. I'll put a little M&M there. He needs something to lean against. Put him in the yard. Maybe put a couple little green candies there to look like bushes. He's come over to have a little nibble, as it is winter, you know, and snow on the ground. I also found a charming, tiny little cookie cutter, which makes little boys, and I've made little girls, and we could also stand those up in our yard. We could take some green jelly beans and put those at the corner, but you know what I forgot to show you? Next to the house, where I was having a little trouble getting the icing right up to the house, take one of your parchment cones that has white icing in and squeeze the white icing right up next to the house where it's hard to spread with your knife. You can make little lamp posts. I have some green icing here with a star tip, and I could also make little bushes that way. We could have a little hedge running right alongside the walk. And the last thing, well, suppose I turn this house around and just put a few little stars like bushes right along the back of the house. And then I have some icing which I have just put a few drops of water in. I say a few drops, not even a quarter of a teaspoon in a little dish, but I think I'm going to have to cut this parchment cone open a little wider. Make sure I have it open with my toothpick. And I think the finishing touches on a winter house is to have some icicles, to have icicles on the roof. So I squeeze icing along the edge of that cut graham, and then I pull down from that icing to make little icicles. And it's a matter of squeezing icing out and pulling away, whoops, at the same time. And I think this gives the house a real finishing little Christmas look. And there we've completed our icicles and our miniature gingerbread house, a cookie cottage.
Oh, Patty, that was so much fun! Are you
Yes, I am yellow. I'm going to show my friends in the audience how to make a real gingerbread house, a big one.
Oh, can I go and get my friend Green to come watch you?
You sure may bring green.
Goody.
Okay, bye-bye. I did want to tell you that there are many other things that this small house can lead to. This is a small cookie cottage, but I would like to show you a train station and train made by an 8-year-old boy. Isn't this something? He was at a workshop I gave, and instead of making a house, he asked if he could make a train station and a train. I think it is spectacular. So you can do all sorts of things with graham crackers, and then this inspires you to go on to big gingerbread houses. And that's what we'll be doing next. Are you ready to make a big gingerbread house?
Yes, I came to do it. Hello,
Who
Patty.
are you?
I'm Green.
Green.
My friend Yellow said that you were really good at making gingerbread houses, and I came to learn all about it.
Well, I'm so pleased you're here.
To all you boys and girls and mothers and fathers out there, please pay strict attention because kids like us love this kind of stuff. Okay?
Okay. Wait a minute. You haven't seen my magic wand.
Ooh.
Yella did, and I can make you disappear out into my audience. Goodbye, Green. I have some different things here to show you. There are many ways to make gingerbread houses. I have here a metal cookie mold. You can get a set to make them. Here I have a plastic cookie mold. The plastic cookie mold made this house, which you can see was pressed out of dough right like you would press out a cookie, and then put together with icing like we did the cookie cottage. There are many, many things to do, and gummy bears, I must turn this back around. Gummy bears are something we haven't talked about. There are so many ways you can use gummy bears. Those gummy bears are building a snowman. And then I want to show you a metal pan, a mold to make gingerbread houses. This mold has a different pattern on each side. One side makes a log cabin gingerbread house. The other side makes a Victorian house. And I have samples of both of those here. They're very charming, aren't they? What I'm going to be teaching you today is making a gingerbread house using cardboard patterns. So these are the patterns that we're going to use, but before we start, we've got to roll out the dough. Here is one batch of gingerbread dough. There are many different recipes for dough to make gingerbread houses, but this is the recipe I recommend and you will find in your gingerbread video cookbook. This is one complete recipe. I'm going to be cutting 1/2 of this recipe in half again, and this will be then 1/4 of this recipe. I'm going to roll out here on my cookie sheet. But before I do, I want to prepare the cookie sheet. Also want to mention to you, if you use a damp dishcloth under your cookie sheet, you will find it much easier to roll out your dough directly on the cookie sheet and the cookie sheet won't move. I'm going to use some spray vegetable shortening. Use a paper towel, lightly go over your cookie sheet. The more seasoned your cookie sheet is, or Teflon cookie sheets work great, you won't need to have shortening on there, but we don't want our dough to stick. I place my dough in the center of the cookie sheet, and here's where I'll be using one of those cardboard patterns that you saw, all of them pictured earlier. I need to put some flour on my rolling pin. It's really important that the rolling pin be floured lightly a number of times rather than heavily one time. We don't want a lot of flour on our gingerbread dough. I'm going to roll this dough back and forth, and you notice it is just about the shape that I want for cutting out my pattern piece. I'm going to put flour on my rolling pin again because I noticed that it's starting to look a little shiny. Roll this again. You want to roll your house pieces a little less than 1/4 of an inch, more than 1/8 of an inch thick. The more experienced you are rolling out cookie dough or pie crusts, the easier this will be. But don't press your rolling pin into the dough. Lightly roll it back and forth, pressing ever so slightly. Down and just take a look. That looks just about the right thickness to me. Get the extra flour off my hands, and if there's some on the dough, you can just work it in so that you don't have white on there. Place your pattern in place. I'm using a larger flat knife, sort of a French type knife, cutting down along the edge of the house pieces, pushing away the excess dough from the pattern. You want to be sure not to have little jagged pieces of dough along the edges because they will burn. Repeat this on the other side of the pattern and at this end. Did you realize a gingerbread house would be rolled out right on the cookie sheet? It's really easy. It does take time. I take this excess dough, put it back over here, and now I'll be cutting out my doors and windows, but I'll be leaving them in place while it bakes. Now I'm going to use a small knife and cut around my door and the window. I want to be sure to cut into the corners with the end of my knife very, very well, because this will help them to remove more easily when I take it from the oven. Now, I could cut that in half, but my shutter's going to come over pretty far, so I've started cutting my windows into thirds, and that gives me extra pieces of gingerbread I can use for stepping stones or other decorations with my house. Now I remove my pattern piece, and this house piece in gingerbread is ready to go into a 350-degree oven. It needs to bake for 10 to 12 minutes. Now here we have a piece of gingerbread house which is hot, just came out of the oven. You need to test for doneness by touching with your finger. This leaves no impression, lightly touching. If it leaves an impression, put it back in the oven and bake it for 3 to 5 more minutes. Or if the edges are getting too dark, drop your oven temperature 25 degrees. Now I'm going to take my large knife, and if the piece bakes out to a rounded shape, remember I'm going to have to build this house and put it together. So I'll just trim off those edges so that, for instance, here we have too much of a curve to have this house stand up very straight. So we get those edges cut off first, and then we cut around the door and the windows. If you forget to cut the shutters, you can still cut them, but it definitely works better if this has been cut ahead of time. And these little pieces make great snacks. I wish I could take this wonderful gingerbread fragrance, which is coming up to me now, and send it along to you with your video. Cut around the window. If by any chance the phone rings and you have to leave this, don't try to cut it if it's cold. It will be too hard. Put it back in the oven, get it soft again, and then recut it. As this dough cools, it gets very hard. All right, now I'm cutting my shutters, and usually I recut. In other words, just to make sure, because it's soft while it's hot, because I don't want to take this door out too soon. And remember, it does bake a lot larger than your pattern piece. Don't feel you have to trim it down to the size of your pattern. I think this probably has cooled enough that I can carefully lift that over, and I can lift out my shutter pieces. I'm cutting around it again to be sure I have it loose in the corners so that I don't have broken crumbs when I lift it out. All right, now we'll lift out these shutters, recut those, and we'll have an extra piece for a stepping stone in front of the door if you'd like. And if you want thinner shutters while this is still hot, I simply trim the shutter, and then this makes a nice snack. You can use it other ways to decorate your house as well, or build furniture for inside your house. But this has to be done while the dough is hot. All right, now I would let this cool on the cookie sheet for just a few more minutes until I feel that it's firm enough that I can slip it over onto my cooling rack. Now you see before you all the parts of a complete gingerbread house. We have the end of the house, the door, the front that you saw me bake. We have one of the roof pieces, another end of the house, the back of the house, and another roof. And you don't want to forget your chimney pieces if you want a chimney on your house. I'm going to be putting these four sides of the house together the same way that you saw me build a cookie cottage. And that's why I believe the cookie cottage is such an excellent place to start when you're building a gingerbread house. Now, of course, the first thing I need are these bags of icing, the same as before. Of course, we also have a variety of some different candies here than I used on the cookie cottage, and you can use slightly larger candy on the big gingerbread house. The first thing I'm going to do is cut my cone of icing open. I'm going to take, let's start with the back of the house, and I will judge where I want it on my base. I'm going to center it, and I want to be sure to allow enough room from the edge of my base for the overhang of the roof, because I don't want the roof to overhang the base because it may then get bumped and broken. So I'm going to squeeze icing along the bottom of this house, and you'll see the similarity in how the techniques to build a cookie cottage are very similar to building a big gingerbread house. Put icing along two edges, and of course ideally if you had a helper to do this with you, or a friend, or your children or grandchildren, it would make it more fun. But I'm going to use a quart jar, you could use a can of something from your kitchen, to just support this house piece until I get the second one ready. All right, now we're going to put one of the ends of the house on next, so I will squeeze icing along one edge, side, along the bottom, and remember, generously. Lots of icing makes for a strong gingerbread house. I'm going to put the two corners together. Notice again, icinged edges to icing edges. Put that together, holding them. I'll use my quart jar to support a little bit here, and I have a little pint jar I'll put over here just to give me a little security and support. And I'm going to turn this slightly and reach down inside the corner. I'm going to squeeze icing up in this corner, and this time I'm going to put a candy stick not only on the outside but on the inside corner. This is going to make my house much more secure. Now I will turn this around very gently so that you can see. I'm going to put a candy stick up on this corner. I'm going to press the one inside a little more tightly into that corner. And this is probably the most, well, let's say, dangerous spot for a collapsed house that we could probably have. And now I'm going to turn this around so that we can put icing up on the back edge, back of the house. Now, I need to put the icing along the edge of the house, along the bottom edge of the house, and then I will put these corners, icinged edges to icing edges, together. And while it's turned in that direction, I'll put a candy stick right up there on the corner, and then ever so carefully turn this house around. Right now the quart jar might be able to go. And I'm going to squeeze a little extra icing into this inside corner. Place another candy stick in there. And I'm going to take some little mints, green mints, and just put up there at the top, just to look a little decorative. We don't want them to come up higher than the edge of the roof, because they'll keep the roof from fitting properly. All right, now we're ready to put the front of the house on. Now, ordinarily, I put the 4 sides on and then decorate inside, but so you can see this, I'm going to take one of my little gingerbread people. I have him decorated on the back for fun too, it isn't necessary, but when you look in the windows you can see his back. I'm going to put a little icing along the front and along his feet, and I'm going to put him right up next to the window so that he's looking out the window. Now before I turn it so you can see him from the outside, I'm going to take a jelly candy and just put a squirt of icing there, and this is just going to look like a window bench or something, but actually what it's going to do is keep our little boy from falling over. All right, now I'm going to turn it toward you so that you can see the little gingerbread boy peeking out the window. Now I do have to turn it back again because I want to put the front of the house on. You can see that it is important to have a very stiff icing. Now I will squeeze icing on the bottom edge of the house front, along the 2 sides. Does it sound familiar, like when we were building the cookie cottage? And icing edges to icing edges, so I'll squeeze icing up along the front edges of the house. Hold your breath. Here goes the 4th side of our house. All right, now I can see a little light through this corner from the inside, so I'm going to give another generous bit of icing to both of those corners. Remember, if in doubt, use more icing. Okay? I tell children when I teach, you know, your teachers often say, don't waste the glue or the paste. Well, the gingerbread lady says, use lots of icing. It's going to make you a stronger house. Now I need to reach inside now and put icing in the corners, which you could see me do more easily when the house was open. And I'll take 2 more candy sticks, put them down inside those corners. And of course the candy is sugar and the icing is sugar, and so the 2 really do make a good stick. Now I also want to add the little green mints at the corners. Tuck that in, don't want it too high to keep the roof from fitting. And there's a little bit of icing I'll take from there so my roof will fit down. And there we've basically put the 4 sides of our house together. Now, this house needs to set up for at least an hour. Clean up the kitchen, decorate your gingerbread people, do your trees, but let this set up a while before you go to decorate and put the things inside, because one bump of these peaks or down could go your house. Now you see a house that I have decorated the outside and the inside. We have a window with some icicles on the windowsill. We have decorated the door, which I've added, a walk of chocolate jimmies. We have a little flower box on the front window. This is another way you can treat your window. And then I'd like you to look inside to see there are many, many things you can do to decorate inside your house. And children love to peek in the windows and see things inside. I would like to also show you the option that you have in doing this house. You remember with the cookie cottages and the graham crackers? I showed you how you could decorate the parts before you put the house together. Well, this is also true with a large gingerbread house. You can decorate the windows, decorate the door, put on the shutters, do all these things with your pieces flat, but you must let them dry at least for an hour before you put your house together. So as far as I'm concerned, there never seems to be time to do that, so I usually put my house together and then decorate it. The other thing that I wanted to mention was a way to support your house. Now, the enemy of gingerbread houses is humidity, heat, and particularly the moisture in the air, which makes them get soft. So I've shown you a way here that you can support your house. I use white styrofoam, which I cut the shape of the house but a little smaller to leave enough room around the edge for the house to fit together. And you can see how I've done this. Just glue it in place with your icing, And then I have a house which I would like to show you, which I have totally supported. This house has been totally supported with the styrofoam. You can look inside and see the four sides have been put together with the styrofoam pieces in place. The house was put together the same way we put this one together. I want to show you the Gingerbread Ideas book, which is written up in your video cookbook. This is a larger book with the pattern for the house, with the supports that I just showed you. In this book, all of the house patterns are full size, and all of the houses you saw at the beginning of this video, the patterns for those are all full size in this book. I just wanted you to know that is available. And now we're ready to put the roof on this house. Remember how we zigzagged the icing to make a larger area exposure of icing for the gingerbread or cookie house to stick to? Well, that's what I'm doing here with a back and forth zigzag action with the icing. I will just prepare one side of the roof at a time. I want to put a generous amount of icing along the front edge. And now we're ready to place our gingerbread roof piece onto our house. Now, if the icing is very stiff, it will usually stay in place. But sometimes this is at an angle, sometimes it will slip. So if that is the case and you don't have a friend to hold it, find something in your kitchen that's just the right size to put under the edges of this roof to hold it in place until that icing has time to set up. Now I'll prepare the second side, put icing in that zigzag motion so that the roof gets to stick to a lot of icing. And you can see why it was important that the house had time to set up a while for the icing to get hard. Because if you put a roof on a house that isn't a little bit hard, you could have a collapsed house. Now I'm going to go back, and I think I need to put just a little more generous icing along this edge. And now I will put the second half of our roof in place. I will turn this around for you, holding it, and I'm going to check underneath just like I did with the cookie house and make sure that all areas have plenty of icing. Now there's a spot here where I can see the edge of the underneath of the roof, so I'll put a little extra. You can even take candies, like, let's see, we could take some green M&Ms and just put them into that icing to help make your roof more secure. That presses the icing into the house. Let's put 2 at each edge of the bottom. You can see we have a gingerbread house almost now when it isn't even quite finished. Now I'll just turn this around to the other side. A child would be thrilled with this house as it is. Check underneath. Now I definitely see we have a little bit of space where there is not icing making contact with that roof. Remember, gingerbread houses don't have to be perfect, but they've got to be cemented together generously with their icing mortar. I'll put the 2 M&Ms under there just to make the house a little stronger. Make that icing go against the house. And I think this is setting up quite well. There's a little bit of space across the top of the roof. So I'm going to put more icing there. Now it seems to me this is setting up quite well, and I would like you to see the chimney go on a house. A chimney is like building the 4 sides of a house again. As these bags start to get empty, I just twist them down. Now I'm going to put icing on the little triangular shape that's cut out of this chimney. Take one of the square pieces, put icing on the bottom, one side, and along the edge. Remember, icing edges to icing edges. Put these together. And remember how I put icing up in the corners of the house? Well, this is what I'm going to do with my chimney. Put a little extra icing up there in that corner. Now I'll repeat with my other piece of chimney, putting icing in the triangular cutout, icing up along this edge. One more edge to do here. Then we'll put the third side of our chimney in place. All right, one more side to go. I'll put icing this time on 3 sides of this last chimney piece. And put icing up these 2 edges. And since I can't get in there too easily, I'm just going to put an extra bit of icing along the bottom. Put it in place. And we have a chimney in place. Now it would be wise to put a few candies at those corners while that icing is still sticky. So I'll put a few of these little candies. They're sort of like Good and Plenty's, but they come in different colors. Let's see. Take a couple green ones. Put another red one here. Remember, you can make gingerbread houses for all seasons. Doesn't just have to be a particular season. This one happens to be into the green and red of the Christmas time. I'll put a green candy there. And this has to be done while the icing is sticky. If it isn't, then you have to add new sticky icing, and that can be done. I have one more green to go. And let's see, how about if we do something innovative here and we'll just put a M&M up there at the top. We didn't have quite room enough for another of the long candies. And we could make lines on that chimney to look like bricks. You can even build a whole fireplace over at one end of your house with the outside part of a chimney coming up and have your chimney at the end of the house. There are so many things you can do when you make your gingerbread house. Now, I would decorate this roof in any number of ways, but remember how we put the M&Ms on the small cookie house? Well, on this house, we can put dots of icing to do our little shingles. And I'm going to use some nonpareils instead of M&Ms. Stick those on. Now you can make all different designs with icing. You can use a combination of candies. It always amuses me, and I love it when children decorate one side of the roof on their house and decorate the other side totally in a different way, because it's the fun of doing it that they like. Things don't have to match, right? Now I continue my second row of candies. And you'll see this roof is similar to the one that we did for the cookie cottage, except we're changing the candies. Then I'll put a scallop design with icing to look like the shingles, and put some M&Ms in between, which really looks pretty and sure does taste good when it's eaten. I have a star tip here in this bag, and I will make my scallops around the candy. And you can see I'll just continue this as I decorate my roof. And look at this. Here you see the completed roof, the chimney with the trim. We have jelly beans and mints along the top of the roof. And now we're ready to put snow in the yard. We have a chocolate jimmy walk, and those chocolate jimmies sometimes tend to work their way out into the snow. So I like to take some extra icing in one of my cones, squeeze it also along the edge of the house. Now it makes it easier for spreading on the yard. And sometimes I'll even squeeze the whole yard right out of my cone, but I'm going to do a part there. And then I have my bowl of icing ready, and it's a good idea to give your icing a little bit of a stir to make sure that you don't have those air bubbles in there, because we want this snow to look really smooth. Get some on my spatula here. Going to just spread this snow in the yard like you were frosting a cake. And I have some things prepared here to put in the yard. You can put just trees and shrubs and bushes. If you'd like to put in gingerbread people, that's fine too. Little gingerbread animals, or decorate with a variety of candies. Now I can take my gingerbread tree, three-dimensional tree which I've made, and put that right in place. I can put a spearmint leaf in the yard here. I'm going to put this little gingerbread girl in front of the spearmint leaf in the yard. And then I'll take some icing again, put it along the house and along that Jimmy walk. Do a little bit of the side yard here. You can make fences from pretzels, pieces of gingerbread. I have a little lamp post I made here with a gumdrop on a little candy stick. You can use a yellow gumdrop, or I use some yellow icing. All right, let's fix this part of the yard. We can put this lamp post at the end of the walk. And then I have a tree over here, which I've made from an ice cream cone. Covered it with green icing. I do have to peel the wax paper off the bottom and put that right at the corner of the house. And here you see basically a completed gingerbread house. There are directions in your video book that tell you how to preserve and take care of your house. But of course, the thing that I want to conclude by saying is the real fun of gingerbread house making is to make one with a friend.
Yes! Yes! A friend. Dad, Patty, this is totally awesome! Oh, how do you do it?
I sure have fun doing it because I put my heart in each house I make.
Oh, that's so good. That's a good heart thumpity thump. Oh, Yellow and I are going to do that.
Are you going to make some?
Oh, yes, our hearts do belong to each other.
I do hope that all of you will make a gingerbread house and put your heart in it and experience the joy of gingerbread house making.
I made a house of sweet decor. Do you have eyes to see that just behind this candy door is a smile from me? My heart's in this house. You see, each one that I make is new, and I make it just for you, and I make it just for you. If you will take a look inside the window all trimmed with snow, you'll see me there and I'll confide. You're special to me, as you know. My heart's in this house. You see, each one that I make is new, and I make it just for you, and I make it just for you.
Lauren, who are you going to give yours to? I think I'm going to give mine to Grandma. She'll love it. I'm going to give mine to Tasha. I bet you never made one before. No, I'm going to give mine to Mrs. Ebenheiser. She lives alone, and it'll make her happy. Mommy, can we eat a piece off of yours?
Squeeze a squish of icing, smooth and sweet and thick. Hold your house together, make your decorations stick. Trim the roof or paint the eaves, put some snow right on the trees. Line the windows and the door, don't touch until it's dry for sure. Line the windows and the door, don't touch until it's dry for sure. bush of icing, smooth and sweet and thick. Hold your house together, make your decorations stick. Trim the roof or paint the eaves, put some snow right on the trees. Line the windows and the door, don't touch until it's dry for sure. Line the windows and the door, don't touch until it's dry for sure.